In this video, I'm going to take you through Rule 225. Bitcoin cannot escape the stock market's gravity. We're going to examine how the S&P 500 futures can give a forward progression signal on Bitcoin. We'll also look into the Nasdaq 100 E-mini futures to see how that can give you an edge inside crypto. We'll also check out the Dow E-mini futures and the signal that Bitcoin and the Dow throw together. We'll examine how the Russell 2000 E-mini futures can give you a really incredible edge. But most importantly, we'll check out the VIX Futures and the incredible signal it also throws. Literally, once you see it, it cannot be unseen. Let's run the numbers. Hi everyone, I'm Ken from CryptoTradingKS and the CTKS method. If you're new, a very warm welcome and welcome back CTKS family. My goal is to assist you to become more of a financial and emotional blessing to yourself and those you love. If you look at this particular quote, you don't need certainty, you need a strategy to profit from uncertainty. The outcome of price movements is always uncertain. It's price moving in a wave between CTKS structural support and resistance levels. But you can help yourself to what's called stack probabilities. What we're looking at here, this is the inverted VIX, that red line. When you look at the white line, that's the S&P 500. The slightly dimmer line is the Nasdaq. And we've got the Russell 2000 and the Dow in here as well. You can see how they're all moving as one. This is a very important thing to understand because Bitcoin is highly risk sensitive. If Bitcoin is selling down, we would anticipate that the main markets are selling down also. Bitcoin trades 24/7 by 365. Therefore, it is the single best risk indicator in existence. When I map the S&P 500, the Nasdaq futures, the Dow futures, and the Russell futures across Bitcoin, you can see these big long gaps. These big long gaps is where the futures simply do not trade. But Bitcoin is trading, and what is Bitcoin telling us? It's giving us an indication of what the main markets could well be doing. In fact, the job of the futures market is to literally project and predict what is going to happen inside the main markets. Now, what does this upward momentum mean that we've seen recently? It means that the individual stocks are coming up. So the Apples, the Teslas, the Nvidias, they're all increasing over time. And this is on a 2-hour basis, going back to around the 22nd. But what you can see here is something very, very clean. Bitcoin and the major market futures of the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, the Dow, and the Russell all move as one. This kind of movement is called directional correlation, and it's very important for you to understand. In fact, you literally cannot stack probabilities and develop systems to profit from uncertainty if you don't understand intercorrelation and interconnection. One of the things that you can see when the major market indices all come down and come down hard, that's a time to be quite wary of bigger bargains inside the markets. If you're trading, retracement trading is the way. But if we start to see the exact opposite, if things are starting to repair and come up, that could signify a big wave of positive price action. One particularly good measure to look at are the VIX futures. You can see that this is Bitcoin here, and this is the VIX futures, the candlestick pattern in the background. Now, if I do something like this, which is pretty interesting, if I invert the scale, you can see that the VIX inverted and Bitcoin move together. This is actually a really important thing for you to understand. If the VIX is coming up, Bitcoin and the stock market and individual stocks will be coming down. Therefore, you should look to lower structural price levels to see where price can get captured. The key to always remember, price is always moving between structural resistance and structural support levels. So therefore, just zooming in, we need to know where the structure is currently. In the last video we did together, we were looking at the VIX Futures when it was coming into this structural resistance level here, and I said if that structure holds, we would anticipate Bitcoin to be going up in value. This was at exactly the time where Bitcoin was literally tanking. A lot of people would just think, no, Bitcoin must literally just keep on going down and down and down. It was around $94,000 and was plummeting to 91.8. But what we saw here is this structural resistance on the VIX Futures just pretty much put a nail in the coffin of downward price momentum from that point. We saw that this structural failure led to literally a recovery rally inside Bitcoin. Knowing where the structure is vitally important, and we saw that when we came down here across the weekend, we experienced a bit of a leveling, and then we've seen further VIX weakness inside the market, which has led to an upward price progression inside Bitcoin. And of course, we know where Bitcoin goes, the major market indexes are also going. So we anticipate, if we continue on this path, a very positive opening for the stock markets. If you're liking the content so far, please smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe. We have one of the best communities on YouTube. If we look at Rule 217, no stock market can escape the US stock market's gravitational pull. Now, what does this actually mean? It means if the US markets are doing this, there's a very substantial probability that other global markets are doing exactly the same thing. There are some subtle differences in how different stock market indexes work, but that is an overall trend that you might want to keep in mind. Looking structurally at charts is a really important thing to do, and we've seen for this month the S&P 500 has been following up to around the 21st, so the first 3 weeks of this month it was following the negative normalized price path, and then things started to repair. Why did they repair? Because the VIX was coming down. You can see this more clearly here. When the VIX lost this area and started to retrace, that's led to a broad-based rally, and that was on the 21st. There is an absolute reason why charts and particular indexes move around. When you understand this intercorrelation and interconnection, it's an absolute game changer. We've seen the S&P 500 go from a negative stance right back to its normalized consolidation price path. When we look at the Nasdaq last month, it finished just below the normalized negative price path, and we've seen that it followed the normalized negative price path for the first week and then has managed to recover. It's got a little bit more strength in terms of its recovery compared to the S&P 500, but we've seen a really good staging of a recovery here from again the 21st, and you know why that occurred. Remember, you don't need certainty, you just need a process and a strategy to deal with uncertainty. These particular price paths are not drawn to reflect the current price at the start of the month. They're designed to reflect the price at the end of the month, and they're drawn up through level 2 standard certification. And what we saw with the Dow, it went very negative and it's still going negative. The Dow is incredibly weak at the current time. Looking at the Russell 2000. Last month, it just was a tad below the normalized negative price path, and what we saw throughout the month, it's been following the normalized negative price path, and from around the 21st, surprise, surprise, it's been recovering. But again, it's not the strength of the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. Looking into structure will be an absolute game changer for you, because you can predict literally at the start of the month where price could go if it's going negative under normalized price conditions. This is literally crystal ball reading. And remember that these price paths are drawn at the start of the month and they're not shifted around to match price action. Looking at the price paths for Bitcoin, we saw last month it ended literally on the consolidation path. It went negative for the first week of this month and then has been recovering. It's almost towards that positive price path. Bitcoin has benefited from the concept of being digital gold, but always remember Bitcoin is incredibly risk sensitive. Remember around that 21st. The 21st marked the point when the VIX started to really retrace. And at that particular point, what did Bitcoin do? It exploded. This is why you need to keep your eyes on the futures and especially the VIX Futures. This is very, very helpful to you. And of course, when Bitcoin does this, what do you think the alts are doing? They're going absolutely gangbusters. And when Bitcoin does this, the alts are absolutely bleeding. A lot of people will tell you they know exactly where price is going, but as price moves in a wave and everybody comes in from different countries all around the world, it's really hard to predict where price is going. Instead, we must know where the guide rails are on price. Now, the way to do that is to mark up our charts through all of price history. We need to understand, and when looking at the S&P 500 futures, what level of structure exists in the market. Now, what does this mean for the VIX? For example, we know that the VIX and Bitcoin are very closely inversely correlated with each other, and we've got directional correlation through the E-mini futures. For example, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, the Dow, and the Russell. What does this mean to us? If we're seeing the S&P 500 E-mini futures come up, we expect positive momentum inside the crypto market and across the other major indices, and downward momentum inside the VIX. If we start to see cases, especially edge cases, where this is not the case, it could actually turn the market in the other direction, and that's what we want to look at. We know that we've got a lot of structural support underneath the S&P 500 futures, which is really, really good. Now, what does this mean for you? What we need to do is to look at where the structural levels are inside the market, how clustered they are, how close they are, what kind of gaps are between different structural levels. And we can see on the S&P 500 futures, there's reasonably light resistance above at the current time. This means that the VIX could keep on falling. Now, if the VIX does manage to come up, we would expect a retracement down to structural levels, finding a degree of support and then retracing back up. Or if they come down further, there's a lot of structure underneath. So what this means is any particular negative price action, for example, the VIX spiking up because it's come into a degree of structural support, could be very short-lived. Now, how do I know the VIX futures are coming into structural support? Well, popping on the indicator, you can see that this area of structure was realistically quite strong, and it did capture price. We got an underside retest and a resumption down. We're going to get a reaction right here for sure. Because price is always moving in a wave, if we get a push up in the VIX here, this will bring Bitcoin down. But also remember, this is overhead structural resistance. It means that the sellers will be there seeking to push the VIX down. And we can also see across the weekend, Bitcoin has been weakening. Why? Because of this structure in here inside the VIX futures. By stacking probabilities and looking across charts and understanding how those charts intercorrelate and interconnect with each other, you'll find that you can profit from uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty inside the markets, that's exactly where the profit is. You will find that you do not need certainty. A lot of people say, I must be certain. Well, if you're certain, the opportunity has already passed. Learning to navigate your way through financial markets that are inherently uncertain is a skill that you realistically need to develop. And one thing is to keep very, very positive. Remember, all results come from the mind, and a better mind creates better outcomes. To get better outcomes, we just need better habits, and those better habits will create a better life. The issue is to always think positive. Positive affirmations for abundance, financial success, and happiness are very important. If you think negative, you're going to be frozen. You will not act on opportunity when it's presenting itself to you. Therefore, to get unfrozen, to get thawed out, just do your positive affirmations, and there's a lot of them inside the creed. Have a great day or night ahead, my friends, and Kate and I look forward to catching up with you again in the next video. Bye for now, and have a great weekend.